size I work most on.
Oh, you did the pH thing here?
No.
Wow.
I wanted to do it, but you took your dirt.
Oh.
Thanks.
Okay. It was
I think I was using
nitrogen, but I had 0,
No,
right?
no, I think it's just stuff from the thing y'all did a great job with me to create or something like that. Okay, what do you wanna do?
Oh, I have no idea.
No, I thought you.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, I don't feel so so. Yeah, I feel sick.
Oh no.
I see my throat hurts.
It sucks.
I know, I was saying earlier that I'm getting these like white spots in my throat. But I read you can get it from a common cold.
Really? Huh.
So
Yeah, course we going around. I had to.
I know, I don't feel good. I wanna go home and just cycle and pass out.
That's what I do sometimes too. Even when I'm not sick.
Kids, they do that too.
Yes, but if you were to the first time, you always would, I know it was not. And so, students are paying attention, they're noticing patterns. It's like pictures.
So I'll do research on this. So
You didn't do edits, right? Edits
what else?
on your, like, did you, we do a score? That's first,
No,
right?
no. That one, the last one you mean? Like
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, I think
No, because that's at the end after you've done everything.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
she adds that, yeah.
Okay, I was making sure I wasn't for sure like, I didn't know we had to put something on track.
No, 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 no. I think that's after we finalize everything. Are we editing it up? I thought we were.
It's got this history of old things.
I'm supposed to edit up.
That's what we used to call them.
I thought we were gonna, because we don't have the full score.
And the way that they
Alright, I just feel it.
call them.
I think we were extra nice to ourselves.
And then the different ways that they iron
Ours, we were extra nice to ourselves.
historically is really interesting. It's something that, yeah, I've had it since-
If you're not, then
It's like
what else?
the history of
Exactly.
And you also can't really do it all in because you have to want.
We did.
Oh, you did on the thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We watched it, but
Okay, on here.
direct instructions hard, boring. I got
So
That's it.
any
We sit there and lecture, that's all.
That's why XSS.
Right, but these aren't.
Guys, we actually totally took a pause.
I'm so excited. Oh, we're together.
I know.
Oh, sorry.
Miss Baker.
I feel really happy though. This is
No
so
science.
sick.
6th grade science.
Okay,
What did you have?
and then we have a lot of fun going through this.
Who did you have last semester? We thought you were learn.
Yeah, but we go on spring break next week. I don't know if these people's names.
Who?
Thinking that,
No, they, I don't know if we have that. Here's my
so we had a
Oh,
conversation
also, like,
about
Mr.
peaks like the particle maker.
This is so
Yeah.
weird.
Jinx.
Mr. Jenks.
Jinx.
It's not
Jinx.
Jinx.
It's not
No.
Jinx,
Let-
it's Jenks, or
Jenks.
something like that, remember?
Jen,
It's a weird spelling.
I don't know.
we got it in here about.
Yeah, we don't have that.
Who?
No. She had a Miss Sally.
Nope.
Or Mr. Sally or something like
Okay,
that. Mr. Shelley.
Shelly.
theory of continuous math.
She goes, he's young and super cute.
Students who don't understand.
Myra goes, I wish I would have him.
No, where is he teaching that?
I don't
Dude,
have
did you get to meet yours?
answer
Yeah, well,
How
we bumped into
to
him
understand
on the way to give him our, or
Is it
drop
yourself?
off the envelope, cause he
Yeah,
didn't show
all
up.
that it's made.
Ours wasn't even
And
there
he's
at
like,
school.
oh shoot, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, we took our lady some snacks and she ended up not being there and then her sub was on a diet and her other person was tonsils sticking out, so we ate the snacks.
We just didn't get it.
I mean, nobody showed up, there was like 4 teachers in total who showed up,
Oh my god.
just 4.
The 2 that were there in the beginning and then 2 later.
Y'all had a bunch of snacks, I bet.
They didn't show up.
I knew I should have took more.
I knew it too, but I was like,
Thinking about that.
I want some more than brownies.
Me too. I love eating ice cream and warming the brownies up and just dumping ice cream.
And then.
What can you tell us by 10 in the morning? Because I just want everything to know.
Okay, so. Okay, so not a new lesson, but later on, where did you show some version, some parts, even, maybe not the whole part.
Sarah going home?
The powers of
No, she's in the bathroom.
Poor Sarah.
It takes her a while with her little belly.
I think that was it.
She's like, I look so pregnant in this video. I'm like, you are so pregnant in real life. No.
She doesn't look bad at all.
No.
If you're looking at her backside, you can tell until she goes sideways.
But I think she's so confused. She thinks.
I don't know.
Okay, guys, we're gonna get started with lesson 1, and remember a lot of what we say with team 1 is going to be similar to what we say with each of you. So, I'm gonna go get some water and I'll be back and they're gonna get started. You might wanna move that word wall over some.
Can you hear everybody now?
She's gone to the bathroom.
Yeah, I could hear her conversation and going back.
Okay. Just making sure.
I'm putting it on mute though.
Okay. But when you go to talk, you gotta talk.
I didn't think we were gonna have to.
I know, I'm putting
Are we getting our exams back today, Kelsey?
That's the plan, but that's been the plan for like 2 weeks now.
I don't know.
Like,
I'm serious.
Also, I remember you guys are so
No, I didn't. That's why I've been eager to get it back. Because I studied really hard, so I don't know what I could
she
have
had
done.
no critiques on her lesson at all.
And I keep checking to see if the grade changes, and I'm like, no, it's still 73. I'm just in case someone entered it wrong.
You know, that happened to me once because
It happened to me too.
so I said, oh, I got your, I didn't got my paper back. And I said, and I said it where? And it was like, but I said, give me like 40 over 45. Oh, I'm gonna be 45. Yeah.
One of my teachers gave me an, I think it was a 68, and I made an 86. And she just put it in wrong, and I didn't even notice until, because you could, it was optional, she put test screens, and it was, vertebrate physiology. And she said, it's optional, you can go look at your test. Well, I went to go look at my test, and I was like, this doesn't, like, the amount of each one's work doesn't add up to what, yeah. And she told me, she's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, like, this is why you come in and check your test. So ever since then, I always want my test back. I always want to look over it.
I was like so upset because I thought I spent a lot of time writing that paper. I was like, oh, wait, so you didn't see what my paper where I got wrong. Oh, okay.
Hot damn.
Good job, guys. Woo woo.
Oh, he's good, but it's like my doctor saying like I can, gain more weight.
I thought you guys' lessons were really good this time. You switched your, instead of going from small to big, you went from big to small.
And so then
We'll
she said,
see.
like, don't
I
stress
think
about
there's still a couple things we needed about.
Are you back?
I'm like,
oh my god.
we wrote.
So I would like to do it for this because I really feel
There goes. Oh, did y'all grade y'all stuff? All this
Somebody
needs to
leave
change.
his chair out in the hallway? This our chair?
I don't think so. It was out there earlier.
Oh, okay. Graded you, just grade them and tell her how we.
I brought y'all, some dried mangoes to eat. It's like eating candy, so just don't get started too much, but I'm telling you, it's like dried candy. And then here is some popcorn, and I have some others, I know, in the fridge. This is better.
That's good too. Orbited brain. I thought we were supposed to sandwich.
I'm very muscly one.
Well, we have a teacher 100. You made 102. Amanda made 101.
Okay, so, here's how we're going to.
Yes, it's still running.
Okay, so we want to use a similar format that we did with the 2E. So the question is, this is the learning objective, and the bottom line is, was that learning objective taught effectively? Do you think the students, real students in this case, would actually learn this objective using this lesson? That's the bottom line. That's the most important thing. So we'll go through some details with Team 1 as a kind of a model, and then we'll do a shorter version with each of the rest of the teams. Okay? So, Team 1, do you think this lesson was effective and met the objective of teaching this learning objective to students?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the evidence for your answer?
So the evidence for our answer is that we felt better about the experience, and the amount of erroneous questions went down.
What made you feel better about it?
Just that the amount of erroneous questions went down. Students were on task. The evaluations were appropriate and reflected student knowledge. What else?
And to what do you attribute those evidences of success?
What do you mean? I just said
Yeah.
3 things.
Yes, but why do you think those evidences appeared? What made them appear in the second time around versus the first time around?
We definitely changed basically a lot of things, like the activities and all those,
We did a full
yeah.
overhaul. I don't
We
think we
changed,
kept
yeah, we
anything.
changed.
Okay, so you went through the first lesson and you almost completely revised it.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're focusing now more on, the feedback from the last lesson, and we took out all the confusion that students were having with, things that were being brought up that didn't have much to do with just confusion in general. Things that we thought our students would understand that they didn't understand.
Can you imagine that? I am glad that never happens to me.
The examples that we used, so they weren't effective in the way that we wanted them to be effective the first time around. But then the second, we made sure to simplify it more and not make things confusing for the students and make the experience
Basic, yeah,
more basic and enjoyable.
basic,
Oh, say that again?
enjoyable,
No, the first part.
basic,
Say that one more time.
basic.
Make it more basic so the students would understand.
Yeah.
That is absolutely critical piece of thinking for teaching.
I mean, yeah, so it was an interesting lesson planning, because I didn't sleep the night before. I have insomnia and I was borderline delirious, and Crystal, bless her heart, we're just sitting there going, what can we do? And I was like, I don't know, let's talk about Legos. And then we just kind of ran with Legos based on some stuff that her I want to say daughter, her little sister had done in her class. So,
So, but it essentially amounted to time and effort put in on it. And that's critical. I'm sitting here editing some things that I have done numerous times, and you know what I end up putting in are things that I had not thought about but came up with students. Now, you only have 5 minutes between first period and second period, so you can't really put that much time in making revisions, because you spent probably several hours, I assume, making revisions on them. Would you say, between the two of you?
I mean, we did a complete overhaul, so yeah.
So you don't have that between classes. You don't even have that if you've got a conference period, you know, between first and second period. That effort has to start up front. That has to be good enough for first period. And I hate to tell you this, but as much as you may plan and effort you put into it, it's still not good enough for first period. You will always find things out that kids are thinking about that you hadn't thought about, or they think differently, you know, than we do. And so that's always going to happen. But the more time you put in it up front, the better the lesson's going to be. And I think y'all saw that with all of your lessons. All of your lessons were much better the second time around. And that's typically the way it happens. All right, so we got to the fundamentals. You think the lesson met your learning objective. It was effective in terms of your learning objective. What did you discover in the 5-minute hallway?
Comparing the two 5-minute reflections, the first one we go, that was rough. And then the second one, we both got in the hallway and we were like, that went really well. And that was our first initial reaction. So our attitudes afterward were completely different because we felt like we accomplished our goal with the second, with the 3 teach first.
Say that sentence again.
We felt like we accomplished
Your
our goal.
attitudes were completely different because you were more successful. We feel better whenever we know that we've done something fairly well. Yeah. That's what makes teaching fun. Okay? And then when you watched it together, what kind of changes on this lesson did you come up with?
I think we really could have spent more time going over each other's parts. So, for example, Crystal drafted the explain both times, and I drafted the explore both times, and then we did the evaluation together. Whereas then when we reverse teached it, you could tell that Crystal was stumbling over things that I was like, oh yeah, and this, like the things that I was passionate about, she kind of, I mean, she still did them, but
She didn't own them because they were not hers.
correct.
What is that? You know, the 8 meta-analysis. Remember that last one, number 8? What does it say?
I don't
Remember approximately what it says? It has to do with tweaking somebody else's work and making it your own. It was not Crystal's work, it was Amanda's work. And so just taking something that somebody else, and that's okay, I mean, this is an artificial situation anyway, we know that. But just taking someone else's lessons and replicating them like they did is not gonna be as effective as if you tweak it and make it your lesson. Your students will learn more. That's what that research says. It's very powerful. And so that was a good example of, you know, of why, maybe not why the research says that, but an example of how, of what that means.
So our enthusiasm levels were different regarding the explore and explain. And the other thing that I would work on, but that comes with teaching, is the transitions that he uses in the classroom. Mine is no longer but it is so. And I probably said so 77 times. I mean, I started counting and then I lost track after like 36.
Did you know it when you were saying it?
No, I didn't. But it was like that word therefore, I'm gonna transition over here, and so, and then I'm gonna come back over here. So, as you can tell,
Or like?
I like to use it as a transition. So, anyway.
Well,
The
in
last time was
defense,
in
it's
that
not the
direction.
worst thing that you could
No,
do.
it's not.
It's distracting, and if we tape ourselves,
It is
Then we can
distracting
see
to
that.
me, yes.
oh, it's
Because,
distracting to you.
well, when I'm recording, when I'm looking at the recording, because I know that's my placeholder instead of I might not say all the time. but
Why
I
are we
will say
afraid
so.
of silence? Why do we have to have placeholders? I think teachers may be worse about that, but I would urge you to become friends with silence. I mean, there are times when you need time to think.
And it may be one of those things that if you're talking, the students aren't, so you're trying to talk as much as possible and fill all the silence. Might be a classroom management
Could be.
strategy.
What did you have next one?
I know for me, there was also some words that I used that, like, I think I said y'all or you guys, I should have said class or, okay, students.
I don't know that that's so bad, but I think as a young, pretty women, you do need to be careful about your language more so than maybe I would need to be. So think about what would be respectful to your students, but not put a barrier and not be so formal. So I don't see anything wrong with you guys. I could say you guys, it'd be okay. I don't know that you could. So, think about as you're out in the classroom, see what other teachers say and kind of, start thinking about the language that you want to craft when you have your own students. So what would be some options? Students would be one, but that's kind of formal. That might be what you use the first 6 weeks of school.
Addressing the class as a collective, using we.
Class,
So
well, but she's
we
calling
need
to
settle
their
down.
attention though.
Right.
I've heard a teacher that I've observed say friends. All right, friends. I personally, I wouldn't use that, but.
Well, I could see a mature teacher doing that. They would
Okay,
feel
friends.
comfortable. But you have to establish who's the boss first.
Right.
And then once you do that, then you can be friends of a kind.
Wouldn't you have an attention getter though for that reason? Some type of.
Okay, yes and no. So there are some attention getters like class, yes, or clapping, or the hand or whatever. It depends. I mean, you may not always want to use that. I think it depends. If you've got noisy students, sometimes the class, yes works better. I would not use it, but I wouldn't have to use it. So, there's a lot of options in teaching, and it's very situational dependent.
And then be prepared for tech glitches. I know I couldn't get the overhead
Why not?
I tested it earlier and it worked, but I
Tested it how many times?
too.
Was that enough?
No. Obviously.
Obviously not,
That's
proof's
what
in the pudding. Yeah, so, you know, technology, I mean, it can eat your lunch. It can really undermine your classroom management. So if you're gonna use technology, you need to be facile with it.
So,
Or, you know, get some kid that's good with it and let them do it. It may be your ADHD kid that needs some focus, and so, you know, there are a lot of ways that you can solve problems. So, you know, think about being creative and all the options that you have, and there's not just one way. But the big word is the P word, practice. Practice, practice, practice.
yes, so just, I ended up doing it on the board, but I didn't think quicker. I wasted time trying to figure it out. Time wasted, so.
But you didn't dismiss it. You didn't just go on. You went to the board. So you had a good plan B. And it you know, it wasn't very long, probably less than a minute that you did all that.
Yeah.
But it will be a problem for young teachers, young pretty women. All of y'all are gonna have a problem.
And then I had the issue with the video, but we improvised. That was fun.
That was smart.
What was the problem?
Did it work?
They also put it
So
on.
mad. I was like, what? How's it gonna work for you?
Why was that a problem?
Cause when I tried to play the video,
It wouldn't play.
it was frozen on my desktop for some reason, the
Uh-huh.
computer screen was. And so I went to the monitor to the projector view and just ran it up like that. One thing I would have done differently, I probably would have used the projector to zoom in so you didn't see the computer screen, all you saw was the video, but that's an afterthought now.
That's for period 2.
Right.
You remember that's what I had to do when I was giving a speech to about 300 people. And my grad student didn't put my dongle back in my bag. So I got to this conference where I was speaking and walked in and started to put it together about 30 minutes ahead of time. I mean, I was not last minute. No dongle.
No dongle.
So I asked the convention people, do y'all have a dongle? Anybody in this room have a dongle? Nope. So I had to flip it over and show the slides on the dock camera there. Fortunately, there was a dock camera there. And I'd never done that before. I don't know where I got the idea.
That was all I had, really.
And in your videos, nothing else from your videos?
No.
Okay. Class, students, your perception, perspective.
Do you wanna go first there?
Yeah. Sorry. So I really enjoyed the activity. I think that it definitely went a lot better, and I do think that, you know, the students got that element as a pure substance. However, for the second activity, I was still kind of confused on how students were just automatically supposed to know, like, what carbon and silver were. And so, like, I think I asked and they were like, oh, well, that's what a carbon is.
Say that
Okay,
again.
thanks.
What?
For their second activity,
Mm-hmm.
I was still kind of confused on how students were supposed to automatically know, like, the different elements.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they gave us, you know, for instance, a fork. And so, we were supposed to put what element that fork was made of. And so I was kind of confused on what prior knowledge we were supposed to use to know that silver was an element, and therefore it was what made the fork. Or like even charcoal. Like, I put down that it was charcoal, but charcoal's not an element. And so just kind of confused on how, like, what knowledge they were supposed to just pull out.
And I think if we had more planning time, what I think we might have done was provided a chart
I think that would be really good.
so that y'all could have made those connections.
Yeah, it was kind of just, that is kind of out of the blue, like, oh, I'm supposed to know carbon, okay, you know.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think, like, the Legos went really well and all of that.
I like that you related it to living in it and the story behind it within it.
Yeah, that was my delirious no sleep thought, but
No,
I
that
loved
was
it.
really good.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I was observing a sixth grade science class and they were doing this similar thing, but they didn't relate it to a story. They just said, you gotta line them up with the same color, hand them a big block. But that right there, oh man, we gotta, you know. That would probably push them a little bit more to focus a little bit more, so that way, I really liked that you related it in the story, that was really good. Same thing with what Sarah said, I don't know if they knew what carbon is, I'm not a sixth
Right.
grader, so I don't know.
Right.
I just think that would be the only issue I have. I thought everything was really great, and it was much smoother than the first lesson.
For sure.
Now, go back to your explanation guide. Do you have a copy of that?
Okay.
So what does that say up at the top?
This
Right
is
here.
not the same one. Explanation guide for elements.
And what is that first sentence?
What is an element?
So there is a definition of an element right here at the beginning.
This is the old
Let's look at this.
one. This is the old one.
So if you're given the definition of an element and then you are asked to observe the element, draw it, make observations, describe it so well you can identify it, which that was done, then are you talking about linking, knowing that that charcoal is
Copper.
pretend carbon?
Yeah.
Just like knowing that carbon is an element, like even though we know, okay, an element is a pure substance.
So we didn't provide a list of, these are the elements we're observing, which we should have.
Well, no, I'm having a discussion here. I'm not telling you an answer. I'm having a discussion here. So at this point, so you have a good explore where they're looking at, you know, whether it's pure or not, a pure substance or not a pure substance. And then we're going into looking at some elements. Cassie and I don't know, maybe I think you and I were also talking about it. If you look at many of the assessments, so if you look at the STAR assessments, especially the ones that are dual coded, if you look, Mayanne and I were looking at Achieve, like NGSS assessments. If you look at those, students can't really understand it unless they have actually physically seen, touched, experienced those concrete elements or materials or experiences in some way. That's how they're really going to understand it. And so if we look at this again, so should this be an inquiry? I mean, could you have a direct instruction model in here about what is an element and these are examples of it? You could. Could you do it this way? So you said that you didn't really know that this was an element with this direction. So how would you take this inquiry type of this part of the lesson and still have students understand an element is a pure substance, in this case, carbon?
I think that the inquiry part was really well and they explained like what an element is. But just maybe having a list of, okay, these.
What discovering though? Aren't you discovering what an
So-
So
element
we
is?
already
No,
discovered
no.
what an element is.
She's saying that she didn't know linking carbon with charcoal.
Mhm.
Yeah, like
So,
how are we supposed to
The
know?
naming of the element, they could describe it, they could do all of the other things, but
They
they
could
couldn't.
describe the charcoal, but they didn't
Right,
link it
because,
with
yeah,
carbon.
because like where does the knowledge come from? Like, oh, carbon. I know what carbon is. all of a
So,
sudden.
Right, so to do that
But a
inquiry
student's not gonna know what
piece-
carbon is.
Yeah, that's the point that I'm making.
Right, we were just missing either an extra handout or chart or something that says carbon's properties are, these are the properties. Oh, charcoal has these properties which are also like carbon, they're the same. We missed that part. is what they're saying.
Or even naming charcoal as being the element, made up the element carbon.
Right. So just like a list or some point of reference to where we actually have names of elements.
Right, so if you give this to a group of 30 students, or hopefully you're limited to 30, and they don't make that connection, then you are gonna start having problems. If you start seeing that students are having problems, like you're talking about right here, what should the teacher do?
Maybe an idea is to have like an extra, no, maybe not a slide or just a piece of paper. And not just a list saying,
Yeah, that's
the
what
fourth
she was saying.
is silver. So that way, when you start to notice that we're pretty much all done, we're trying to figure out what it is. Because I remember you came by and you asked, well, what do you think it is? Is it silver? Is it this? Is it that? We're like, well, you know, we don't know.
Right.
That's when you stick it up there. You're like, that's silver. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so like how you were saying, like properties of
Yeah.
elements and like connected.
Okay, so
Not
That's-
give them
that's
the
an
direct
answer.
but let them figure it out.
that's an answer to a different question. My question is a general question, not, this is only an example, but a general question of what do you do when you see students, they don't get this.
We stop and we explain it to everybody.
You stop and you go back to the whole class. And this may be where you stop and say, okay, this is charcoal and it's made of carbon and, you know, I don't know, whatever else that you want to say about it. So it's almost like a direct instructional model where you're doing this. Now, the thing that I have not seen, that I've seen in other lessons, is they have taken aluminum foil and had students bend it, tear it, do different things to it, but still end up with the idea this is still aluminum, no matter what size, how small it gets, because you get then into that particle nature of matter that we've talked about a little bit. And so I think I would suggest that you think about using aluminum foil because it has a lot of characteristics that would demonstrate the ideas that students need to know. Okay, so that was the answer. If you see if you have to answer the same question to a couple of students or a couple of groups of students, it's time to stop. That means that lesson is not working at that moment, and you gotta stop and fix it at that moment. And it's okay. I mean, it means that you're actually a better teacher if you're paying attention to your students and you stop them and say, okay, this is not working, or stop, I need to clarify something, and then you put that in for the next period. Okay, any other comments?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say that I liked the explanation card. It was a lot easier to follow this time around, and I think it flowed well. If that makes sense. Yeah, that's all I have.
I said I really liked the Lego video. I was able to make the connections with the concept map y'all gave us. I thought that was really good. Crystal used her teacher voice. And just the same thing that Shauna and Sarah said about the part 2 of the observations. I said if y'all could give us a picture word bank or some type of word bank.
I would do that.
So yeah, like everybody said, it's a fun activity, and I especially like your building blocks idea because that's a good analogy for elements. But I did notice that you mentioned elements and symbols before you defined it, and you also introduced symbols before you introduced elements. So we look at the symbols already before we know what elements are, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
The Explorer did that.
Yeah. And also you didn't explicitly explain that elements are represented by symbols.
And we didn't want to.
Okay.
Yeah, we chose not. We made the decision not to because we were doing one concept.
It's funny because then like during my lesson, Zoe was saying, oh, but you didn't explain what symbols were.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be aware, but that's good you're aware of it.
And ideally, like in an ideal world, we would be able to tie it all together, but I don't think given the time constraints, we were really able to, not to the degree that we wanted to.
That brings up another question. How long did this lesson take?
Our time, it was like 52 minutes.
Okay, well, I've got 60, but that's close enough.
Yeah.
So 60 minutes to have a good lesson on elements or a pure substance. What does that tell you?
There's not enough time in the day.
Well, it might tell you that. I had something else in mind though.
Well, I mean, a lesson can span multiple days.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. My grandma called me a phone. I'm like, I'm sorry. Okay, that's how it's going. ¿Por qué tú hablas? Estoy hablando por teléfono, engancha el teléfono.
What?
She's getting on. She's like, who's on the phone?
Who's on the
Who is
phone?
that?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
It's time for your insight,
Hold
your
on
input.
with that.
I liked the lesson, but I don't know, it kind of did drag on for a little bit, so I started to get bored and lose interest in what we were doing. But
Is that because
besides that,
you
it
knew-
was a lot easier to follow.
Is that because you already knew the concept?
Huh?
Is it because you already knew the concept? That's why you felt bored.
No, I can't really, I don't think it's because I already knew it, but something just threw me off, and I'm not sure if it was like when Crystal mentioned the elements when we were doing the second part, that's kind of like when my mind just went like, okay, if I was a sixth grader, I don't even really know what we're talking about anymore.
We already discussed that.
Yeah, I know, so that's what I'm saying. But those are my only comments.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to what I was saying. So, I think we've all agreed it was a pretty good lesson. There are tweaks that need to be made to it, but it was certainly, and as all of yours are, you know, your second lesson, 3 E's are always better than your 2 E's. And in this case, I think this semester much better. I made a lot of improvement. But my point is, if you are out teaching students and you're trying to teach the TEKS, you have to really make some decisions about how much of that TEKS is going to be taught in a lesson. Now, excuse me, it might be, it might be that, you know, you only have 45 or 50 minutes for a class. Well, you're not going to have that much for instruction. So, you know, if you can get if you can get taught what your goal is, and you can do it in about 35 minutes, then you're probably safe. So, if this lesson could be done well in 35 minutes, and it could because you would practice it enough, and you'd be a little bit more smoother, and you'd have some of the kinks ironed out with it. But the idea is that this was a good lesson, and it was a very simple concept here. But you see how much time it took for a good lesson on a simple concept. So please don't teach more than one concept per lesson.
Yes, ma'am.
Please do not, because your students will just end up, teachers think that, okay, they'll learn all this, and this is simple, like Zoe was thinking, she got bored with it. But it's not simple to them. You've got students in there who have, you're gonna have a lot of SPED students. You're gonna have students who may not speak any English. They may not even speak a language that you've ever heard of, depending on where you are. I think Houston ISD has 300 languages in it. I mean, it's a huge number. I don't remember.
Wow.
It's something like that. It is just a huge number. So, you know, depending on where you are, I told you I had a student in, I don't know, maybe Round Rock or somewhere that the population was primarily Indian. So they were speaking Hindi or, you know, something like that. And so, you know, you don't know. You have to craft your lesson. Have y'all seen did y'all see the sorting the elements, the minerals, the little short lesson on minerals yet? Okay, I'm going to show you that. That's on the teaching video. And one of the things that the teacher, I love this teacher. He's an older man, but he's very sweet. He's very kind with the students, and you know, just does it at their pace. And he said that this was the most difficult year he's had. He's probably been teaching 25 years. I mean, he's had a lot of experience. But he said that students are coming in less and less prepared, and so he just slows it down.
Yeah,
He does
he
what.
said it normally takes like 3 days or something. It took like 5 days. Or
Mhm,
something.
yeah.
No idea.
Yeah.
We watched it.
Mhm, yeah. So it's, you know, you don't know what kind of students you have, and you have to teach to them. It's not teaching to your district scope and sequence that's the most important thing, it's the students. And if you try to teach too many TEKS, then they're not gonna learn much of anything, and they're gonna get frustrated, and they're gonna think, I'm too stupid to learn science. And that's not the case.
And it's amazing, cause like in my block right now, I'm observing a pre-AP class versus my other partner in the class who's observing an on-level biology course. And the pace at which the teachers teach is incredibly different. But I don't think I would be comfortable teaching at the pace that my pre-AP biology teacher teaches. But you can see her students, she let me grade some stuff, but the students either get it or they don't. It's very drastic, all A's or D's and F's. There is no B grade for her. So I wonder if she paced her lessons differently, if she would see more C's, B's and C's.
Well, I would think so, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah.
And if, you know, if you're only teaching to the A students, heck, anybody can teach to the A students. They don't even need a teacher. You know, that should not be the target audience. If you have, especially if you have GT kids in there, I mean, you need to be doing things a lot different with those students than you do with your other students. So you need to think about, you know, different levels that are in there and having different assignments, different ways of doing it. There are a lot of strategies that are used with students that are having trouble even in pre-AP classes of doing workshops, you know, on different topics. So, you know, from 7:15 to 7:30 we'll have a workshop over here in this area on topic A, and from 7:30 to 7:45 then we'll have a workshop on this, and it's posted on the board so students can come into the kind of like tutoring, you know, for whatever